Hello, everyone, and a very good day, good afternoon, or good evening based on wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to the very first episode of Rancher Live for the year 2024. And here's also me wishing you a very happy new year. I'm Divya Mohan, a senior technical evangelist at SUSA, and I'm also going to be your host for today. Sorry, there's not going to be Robert for any fans uh, of him around. But yeah, so today is going to be about Cilium and the community and all the cloud native cool stuff that they've built around. The Cilium project, and for that I've actually got with me here Bill, who is the community pollinator for Isovalent. I hope I got the title right there. And hi Bill, welcome to Launch Live and a happy new year firstly.
Happy New Year's to you too.
Yeah, so I know that in addition to your day job, you've also recently become the author of a book for which you are signing copies at CubeCon, I've heard, and I yet have to receive mine, so that's something that I'm probably gonna chase you down for, just like giving you a forewarning there. And and I know that you're also going to be speaking at first time and have spoken previously at a lot of community events. But do you want to add on to your introduction or give further details about yourself?
Sure, maybe I can give a little backstory about myself. So I would say I'm different than a lot of people in the cloud native community where I don't have a tech background. I did my undergrad in biochemistry. I accidentally stumbled into this industry and I've had a great time since. I've gone through like a couple different like startups from really small to bootstrap to venture backed. I also worked at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation and helped kind of re-kickstart the KCD program there. So I've done a lot of different things around the cloud native community. And now I'm working to grow both Cilium, Tetragon, and EBPF as great projects to be a part of.
Right. And since we're going to speak about Cilium today, I like want to get this out of the day. Congratulations on being accepted as a graduated project. Although it's like I been like I know don't know a couple of months or something, but congratulations nevertheless. This is the first time I think we're speaking after a very long time. So congratulations on that. And for those who are like blissfully unaware about Cilium and EBPF, can you give like a 10,000 feet view of what it is and what EBPF is? Because you've written a book about it, so I'm guessing you'd be the best person to talk about it too, among the both of us.
Sure. So in case you missed it, the book that Divya is referring to is the Illustrated Children's Guide to EBPF. So kind of like taking the core concepts and breaking it down. You can find it on the website ebpf.io. And so kind of like what EBPF is it's allowing us to add programmability into the Linux kernel. And so if that doesn't kind of like make a lot of sense at like first glance, like the way that people like to explain it, right, is Linux is kind of like this 30-year-old technology and it's kind of like slow moving because it's deployed in millions or billions of different places, right? So we need to be careful so we don't break anything. And that means we can't kind of like innovate or change things as fast as we need to, especially for the new use cases like cloud native. And what eBPF allows you to do is to run like, verified safe programs at specific hook points in the Linux kernel to run specific programs. And this allows us to kind of extend the functionality of the Linux kernel in a safe and performant way. The comparison that a lot of people like to make is eBPF is to the kernel like JavaScript is to the browser. And what JavaScript allowed us to do is instead of having static websites, essentially make them interactive and something that you could work with on the fly or live. And that's what eBPF allows you to do to your infrastructure. Add new ways of networking, adding new ways to secure or observe systems, and lots of other functionality as you need.
Right. And how does Cilium leverage EBPF towards, providing all the functionalities that it does in a cloud native context.
Yeah, so Cilium leverages eBPF as its like kind of core foundational engine, right? So all of the stuff that Cilium is doing is through eBPF programs. So Cilium is essentially a agent that installs eBPF programs and runs them as they need to. Cilium focuses mainly on cloud native use cases around networking, observability, and security. And so kind of like breaking each one of those down one by one. So on the networking side, right, in distributed computing, we're not just running on a single machine, we're running on tens, hundreds, thousands of machines, and we need a way to make sure that they all can connect and communicate with each other. And in the Kubernetes world, we call this a CNI, or container networking interface. And this provides the connectivity that your cluster needs. And so at the most basic layer, Cilium is a CNI for your Kubernetes cluster. And it allows different pods to talk to each other, different nodes to talk to each other, and even allows cross-cluster communication through cluster mesh. So you can have services in different clusters talking to each other. And then kind of on top of that, controlling the network. I think the next big use case people look at is on kind of like the security, especially around network security, encryption, network policies, making sure all that traffic that's going across the wire is secure and you can use it, and you can lock down your cluster so you're not leaking data. Then once you kind of have everything running and in place, you want to make sure that you're not using your network policies to block connections between two microservices that need to talk to each other, or you're like not allowing traffic that you shouldn't. And so Cilium has this extra piece called Hubble. And what Hubble allows you to do is essentially takes all of the information from Cilium as a CNI and allows you to essentially have observability data from that. So where is the traffic flowing in our cluster? What kind of connections are being allowed or dropped? And what is the different rate of traffic that we're having across our cluster? And so there's both the CLI where you can pull data in real time, and Hubble also has a UI. And a lot of people like to use kind of the Hubble UI to kind of provide information, right? So you have your essentially platform team, are a lot of times running the CNI and the networking and setting up the infrastructure. Then you have your application teams on top of that, right? And if you want your applications to be able to kind of like observe their application and debug any networking problems, a lot of teams like using Hubble for that because it gives them a very visual way to understand how their network traffic either is or isn't working. And then the last part of the project is Tetragon, and that's focused specifically just on security. And so what Tetragon allows you to do is have security observability, right? So we said eBPF allows you to observe anything that's happening on a Linux machine. So that also allows you to observe anything that's happening on a Linux cluster. So say you have a malicious actor in your infrastructure and you want to be able to understand what kind of things that they're doing outside of what your application normally would do. So Tetragon allows you to see all of that. And then it also has a runtime enforcement component to block anything that you don't want happening. So that's kind of in a really quick overview what Cilium is. So cloud native networking, observability, and security.
Right. And if we were to talk about Cilium from a component perspective, right? Could you like give like a 10,000 feet overview of the components that would typically get installed if when Cilium is actually installed on your cluster?
Yeah. So the Cilium has like a couple different components that it has. The main things are going to be the Cilium agent. And so this is a daemon set that's installed on every single node. And this is what's going to talk to both the Kubernetes API server to understand like how the cluster should be connected together and what needs to talk to it. And then the Cilium agent is also going to be what's installing the actual eBPF programs onto the worker node. So that's kind of like the core component. Then the eBPF programs are going to control what we call like the data path. So essentially how the packets are all moving around the cluster. And I would say those are kind of like the two main components of Cilium. So there's the agent and there's the data path. Then off of the agent, exporting a lot of the information goes to Hubble Relay, which then can be visualized in the Hubble UI. And kind of all this is installed into the cluster and managed with the Cilium operator.
Okay. And for those who actually want like a quick video about this, there is also a video that I will link in the description. It talks about like all these components um, in like a discussion format, and I'll also be posting it on the live chat so that y'all can actually refer to it and gain more insight. Of course, there's also the option of going through the docs, which I would highly recommend. But the video is very informative for those who are getting started. Now, switching gears a little bit and moving on to the community side of things. Because the Cilium community has grown, and Bill, you can surely attest to that, in its journey from sandbox to graduation. Can you speak a little bit to the growth of the community and how the project has pretty much been powered by the community in terms of like the widespread adoption and love that it has received over the past couple of years?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess rewinding all the way back to the beginning, I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize is Cilium is actually like quite an old project. It was founded in 2015, so it's 8 years old now, right? And I think a lot of people see Cilium as kind of like this overnight success, but kind of like an 8-year journey because you get to this point where it's really become ubiquitous across the cloud native industry and really become kind of like the de facto standard for cloud native networking. I would say like a big part of that success was betting on EBPF from the very beginning. There's lots of other like CNIs in the cloud native space, but Cilium kind of differentiated itself by having EBPF as its core engine from the beginning, betting that kind of as we scaled up cloud native deployments, the performance, scalability, the security components were going to be the most important parts for people doing large scale cloud native deployments. And I think that kind of bet on eBPF and kind of like that bet on where the industry was heading has really proven out in the last couple of years. I think that's why we're seeing so many people moving towards Cilium because of these advantages it provides in terms of performance, scalability, security, and other aspects that like companies are going to need in the cloud native world. And then kind of like on the like actual community building side, so that's kind of what I focus on at Isovalent. And I think this has also been like a journey and a process too. It hasn't been an overnight success. It's been kind of like building like one by one. So when I first joined like Isovalent, we didn't have any public CNCF case studies. We had an adopters page, but we didn't have it on the website. And so the first thing that I did was, start to talk to companies and say, who is using Cilium? Would you raise your hand? Can we add your logo to the website so people can start to understand, like, yes, other companies are using it. That right. The next part is asking them if they'll do case studies, talking at conferences, doing other things like that. And so now Cilium has over like 10 public case studies on the CNCF website with a range of like awesome companies like Adobe and Bell Canada. We have a bunch of conference talks at the last CubeCon. I remember when I first joined, there was 10 talks on Cilium, and we thought that was a lot. And at this past one, there was 25. So, right, people are excited about it. They want to talk about it. There's a bunch of end users talking about the project. And as people kind of like see that adoption and those proof points, they start to adopt the technology too. And right, so it's kind of like this incremental process of like having people say like, yes, I use Cilium. This is the reasons why I do it. And I think that really resonates with people when they hear from end users about like why they're actually adopting a technology. That's what gets people excited and want to have that in their cluster too.
Right. And to your point, I remember, I mean, I've been a subscriber to your newsletter, I think, from the very start. Uh, And I remember, like, your newsletter being significantly shorter, significant. And now it's something I look forward to reading, and I cannot believe the amount of use cases and uh, case studies that have come out that are not probably published on the CNCF blog, but even, like, the technical parts of it, which are published in, like, really niche areas of the net, like maybe Medium or on their own personal blogs. It's been such a pleasure reading all of it, because they come from actual folks, like engineering folks working on these projects. And I think I recently came across one on your newsletter and conveniently took it for mine, because it had K3S and Cilium working together for the use case of the I'm gonna get the name wrong. JYSK is the name of the company, but yeah. So I read your newsletter and I was like, oh my goodness, this is really really cool. And finally, and this was after we had scheduled the live, and I was like, this is a very cool use case to have included in the newsletter, and I'm definitely going to include it in mine too. But I think a lot of the edge use cases and a lot of the use cases that even we see on, our Slack channels are pretty much trying to incorporate or leverage Cilium along with various rancher distributions, whether it be RK2 or whether it is K3S. And a lot of work has been done to actually get this seamlessly working as a single piece. Not going to discount the engineering efforts behind that, but also I think community efforts are very very important, given that the kind of coverage and the kind of content that has been out there wasn't there. And I'm actually pretty sure that earlier there used to be very 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 few blogs about Cilium, and now every fortnight I can see at least a ton of them in your newsletter. So I'm testimony to that as an avid reader of your newsletter. And talking about talks for Cilium, right? We have a full-fledged CiliumCon. So I'd like to kind of hear your experience about, curating the schedule, and probably, your experience of CiliumCon in the very first place.
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually really excited to talk about this one because I'll actually be the co-chair for CiliumCon in Paris. So if you're coming to Paris, make sure you come to CiliumCon and say hi to me. Um, it's been really interesting to kind of see the event grow. It started as like a half-day event where we had a bunch of great end user talks from companies like IKEA and the New York Times, right? And then it grew to a full-day event, and now we're doing a full-day event again. And it's really cool to see like the interesting use cases that people are having with Cilium. I can't say the schedule yet because it hasn't been announced, but it'll be coming out very shortly. And having looked at all the talks, it was really tough to make a decision between like all the different ones because there's so many great things. And I think the other thing about the schedule is it really speaks to kind of like the diverse places and like areas that are that Cilium is being implemented. I think for everything from service mesh to like really low level networking with like BGP and everything in between. And I think that's kind of what's exciting about Cilium for me is that like people are seeing so many use cases for it and it's tackling so many problems that people are having.
Right. And there's also, like, again, I think there's a Cilium certified associate certification coming up, which is in beta right now, if I'm not wrong. So can you speak a little more to that as well, or is it like supposed to be kept under wraps? Because I know it's in beta for sure, but is that top secret stuff as well?
Yeah, so this is something that we've been working on for about the past 6 months, right? I think we're really seeing the like growth and popularity of Cilium in the industry, and people want to really show to their employers that they have the skills to understand what Cilium is and they can use it. And so we're launching the Cilium Certified Associate exam, so the CCA. And it actually just went into beta yesterday. So this is, if you're on the stream, go check it out now. It's, I think, a really cool opportunity to test out the exam and give feedback on it before it goes live to kind of like everyone else. For me, this is a bit funny too, because kind of like in the networking world, all the Cisco certifications were really important and almost became like a golden ticket to a job. And I think we could see something similar happening with Cilium certifications, because I think it really is becoming core to a lot of what we're doing in the cloud native industry.
And you kind of brought this on yourself by mentioning Cisco. So I'm just going to dive into the next one. So, as everybody on the stream is probably aware, or if you're not, congratulations, you've not been on the internet um, as much as I have over the past couple of weeks. Cisco has, announced its intent to acquire Isovalent and, support the Cilium project. And I think these are exciting times to live in, given, Cisco's already a strong networking force to be reckoned with, and given the background that it comes from, I think it is actually a match made in heaven, which nobody thought of. In retrospect, it seemed like a match made in heaven. So how excited are you about this journey, and about the things to come?
Yeah, I'm super excited to be joining forces with Cisco. They've been an early investor and kind of been betting on Isovalent since the beginning. So it's finally really cool to see that kind of come to fruition and us being like folded back into like the Cisco fold. I think I'm also really excited about this because they're really betting on open source, on Cilium and EBPF as kind of the future of the networking world. And to have a networking giant like Cisco kind of like say that and make that bet on Cilium and EBPF, I think is really strong testament to the technology. It makes me even more excited for the future of both of them.
Right. And I'm just going to break the flow here for a bit because we've gotten a question from Faisal. I'm not sure if he's still on, but he has asked a question, firstly, regarding how EBPF could impact Linkard's offering. And given that Linkard prides itself on keeping itself simple and light, and given that he himself is going to or at least planning to mainstream EBPF capabilities, but could you talk about EBPF in the context of any impact that it has on other projects in the space?
Sure. Though kind of before I jump in, I don't want to like speak for other projects. So I'm a maintainer of the Cilium project, but I'm not involved in Linkerd, so I don't want to speak on behalf of their project. I know William Morgan, who is the founder of Linkerd, has like quite some strong opinions on eBPF, and he has some blog posts. If you want to kind of like learn more about the effect of eBPF on like the future of Linkerd, I'd recommend reading those blog posts because they'll have kind of like the official like project stance there. I think EBPF is doing a lot in the service mesh space, and you can see that with Cilium service mesh. And we're really starting to see more and more functionality go into EBPF too. Like HTTP parsing, something that people thought could only be done in user space, has actually been able to be done in EBPF for quite a long time at Isovalent. There's actually some recent blog posts about that too, and I know there's been conference talks about it too. And so I think, like a lot of things, we're going to see the experimentation, and then we're going to see a lot of that functionality moving into the kernel with eBPF, and I think that's like really quite exciting. And then the second half of that question around what are some of the challenges around eBPF, I would say like the biggest challenge I probably hear is like actually like still the programming. Like eBPF does make it simpler to like reprogram the kernel, but it's still low level systems engineering. And if you don't kind of like have that background or understand, kind of like systems programming itself, it might be difficult. And so I think some of the confusion here is that like EBPF is this powerful technology and allows you to reprogram the kernel, but not everybody needs to do that. I think we're going to see a lot more people leveraging eBPF than actually writing eBPF code itself. And I don't think that's a bad thing either, right? It's this powerful technology, but to be able to harness and take advantage of that power, not everybody needs to write it, right? They can take advantage of a higher level project that's leveraging eBPF, right? So for example, like essentially what Cilium allows you to do is to go from YAML all the way down to bytecode without having to understand all the steps in between by writing, kind of the configuration of Cilium, like don't allow, packets from this IP address or block traffic between these two pods that's able to be translated into, an eBPF program for you. I think that's quite cool and quite powerful. So I think eBPF does have some challenges, but if you kind of take higher order tooling, you don't have to kind of deal with a lot of those complexities and challenges while still getting the benefit and the power of eBPF itself.
Right. And I think we're almost at the end of the session. So I'd like to pick your brain on what you think is next from Cilium perspective, as well as from the perspective of everything within the security networking and observability space in the cloud native universe.
Yeah, so the things that I'm most looking forward to this year. So first on the networking side is I think we're really going to start to see a life of Cilium beyond just Kubernetes itself. Like in the cloud native world, we like to talk about Kubernetes, but there's a lot of IT outside of a Kubernetes cluster, and we still need to connect that back into the cloud native world. And Cilium has started to take the first steps into that with cluster mesh, but also now with Cilium mesh. And what this allows you to do is to connect other virtual machines, bare metal machines, other things into your Kubernetes clusters as if it was part of the cluster itself. And I think this is a really cool piece of connecting cloud native to the rest of the IT estate. I think that's going to be a really powerful technology in this coming year. And the second part on the security side, so Tetragon, which is a sub-project under Cilium, recently reached the 1.0 milestone. And I would recommend go checking out the launch blog post. It has a lot of performance numbers there. And a lot of times security is kind of this trade-off between, overhead and observability. But now with eBPF, you don't have to make that trade-off as much because it's so low overhead. I think we're going to be able to see a lot more people having like powerful security observability with Tetragon going forwards. And now that the project has reached that 1.0 milestone, I'm really excited to see a lot of people picking up that project. I would say the most interesting thing about this is that what some people might not realize is Tetragon has actually been in production by some of the Isovalent customers for a couple of years now. So while it may seem like a newer project, it was even in production before it got released into the open source. And so I think Tetragon is going to have a big security impact on the security landscape in the coming year.
Right. And if folks want to learn more about Cilium and eBPF, and the rest of your projects, where can they head to? I know that you have a lot of interactive tutorials, for one, and they're like fantastic interactive tutorials, by the way. And I've personally tried a lot of them to learn more about it. But yeah, but what are the other areas that not areas, rather, what are the other avenues that people can check out your project on, rather
Yeah.
your project?
Yeah, so I would check out ebpf.io and cilium.io as websites. Those have a lot of use cases, users, and kind of like ways to get started. On the Isovalent website, as you said, there's a lot of hands-on tutorials. These are live lab environments that are really cool to get hands-on with both of the technologies, and so you can kind of code your way into a bit of knowledge. And then on social media, we're active both on like Twitter or X and LinkedIn, and you can follow us on either platform. And the last thing, as you said before, I do have a newsletter. I give a roundup of everything that's happened in both communities. So if you don't want to follow us on any of those, just subscribe with your email and you'll be able to understand everything that happened every 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I can attest to the fact that he does send it out every 2 weeks, by the way. Like, it's something that is unmissable. So if you're interested, like, even if it's like a couple of hours late, you always do manage to send it out. So yeah, and I will also link all of this in the description for this video. They're also available on the live chat, but for what it's worth, I'll also put it on the video just in case folks are watching this recorded. But thank you so much, Bill, for taking out the time today and for jumping on this stream with me. It's been a pleasure having you here, and hopefully we bump into each other at an upcoming event, perhaps CubeCon, I guess.
Yeah, see you. I'll see you at CubeCon latest, and I can't wait. And thanks for having me today.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.